Welcome back. This is Zephyr with another hatch-related reading. So there's not going to be any gameplay in this episode. There will be some show-off of what's going on, but not actual like beating bosses or anything. So some debate and decision has made me say that this is going to be the 2.0 of the mod. This is intended to be the final content patch. So bear with me as long as it takes to get this out. I do want to hopefully get this out in the next couple of weeks. So some of this you've probably seen if you've watched any of the previous or more recent episodes or whatever. We're going to be talking a lot about the bigger stuff. I need to talk about this. I think we already talked about this, but I can cover that very briefly. We'll talk about this, and I think this has all been covered. And then this down here, boss tier changes, which includes item tier changes and item rebalance and all sorts of stuff. So let's get into it. Saltguard is evolving. It has different needs than the original game. It has different goals than the original game, sort of, I guess. One of my goals is to make ragdolls a little bit more intentional feeling. Sometimes they just feel a little whack, a little crazy, a little unfun. So I've tried a couple different things with ragdolls. Let's start from the bottom, actually. So there was previously discovered a small stagger. It's about half the animation frames, so it's like 7 frames versus like 16 or something. If you missed a parry or a block because you were trying to time it, you would go into this stagger animation because you're considered idle. You hadn't pressed a button according to the game. And it completely ignores poise, and it would stagger you for 7 frames, which is a little over 0.1 seconds. 7 over 60, so to say. Excuse me. This has been removed entirely. I don't like the extra punishment if you miss a parry or a block or something. The game is already fast enough, and having some kind of weird extra thing that ignores poise is weird. When I say running, I do mean probably walking. I haven't double checked that. But running probably means like moving, while sprinting is the other term, more or less. I want to enable this if it's not already enabled. I haven't looked into it, but that's the last thing I need to do here, probably. So what am I doing? Okay, so ragdolls are designed to attempt to only finish out intended combos and then end in iframes as normal. So, for example, Pyromancer and Huntsman have a double hit where like Huntsman can dash through you, it pops you up into the air, and then Huntsman will hit you once or twice with his axe. This does a lot of damage, which is maybe something that needs to be looked at a point-by-point basis. That is something I still want to do with a lot of specific boss hits and stuff. Do not have, for whatever reason, any motion values to them. So the double hits and the triple hits and the single hits all do the same damage as long as they're the same like hit type. So I've done that in the past for the Dead Samurai and the Temple of the 11. So I'll be looking at that for bosses and stuff like that, especially on their melee hits, I think is where that's most prominently found. But Huntsman will still be able to hit you approximately 2 times, or maybe 3. But there is now a adjusted bunch of numbers. So the goal is that you are typically going to get hit by like 1, maybe 2 hits after a juggle. Juggle means anything that kind of knocks you into the air and takes control away from the player. It does not mean normal falling. So special attacks like Tornado, which I'll mention down here, are exempted from the default timer rules, but do protect from outside sources. This is intended to treat it. Oops, don't drag and drop that. This is intended to treat it like a grab, sort of. Tornado is, in my opinion, a really cool little effect, but it was maybe a little excessive. So how this works generally, let's go down here. Let's talk about this first, and then we'll talk about kind of the exceptions and examples. So in the base game, you do have damage reduction in the air. So once you're juggled, all secondary hits, not the hit that hit you, but all secondary hits give you 50% damage reduction. This is something I may still put back in, but the idea is that like this wasn't in the game by default. This was added later because people didn't like the ragdolls. And this probably is related to the fact that a lot of ragdolls and a lot of hits don't have motion values. So this effectively created a new motion value that took whatever it was and cut it in half. This only typically affected 1 or 2 hits unless it was something like a multi-juggle like the tornado, which didn't do a lot of damage to begin with, so a 50% cut wasn't really the big deal. What was the big deal is being hit by outside sources, where you get ragdolled by one thing and then ragdolled by another thing, and you feel like you just lost control of the entire game because, well, it's kind of a type of genre that you expect to have probably more control over, not be bounced around like a pinball. Now, I don't mind being bounced around like a pinball, so I've been modifying a lot of this stuff, but I like being able to understand what's happening in those circumstances. So in the base game, Ragdoll is based on your poise. This was, again, added after release. But you have a maximum duration of 0.75 and a minimum duration of 0.25 if you had extremely high poise. And this was inclusive of enemies too. These changes are not inclusive of enemies. They do take in consideration only player. So enemies can still be ragdolled for longer periods of time effectively. Sorry, I got a frog in my throat. So damage during ragdoll has been removed, but ragdoll duration has also been set to the very minimum duration. This should allow for that 1 or 2 hit follow-up to work on Huntsman or Pyro. I might need to change this to like 0.4 or something like that, but you get the idea. We're not going all the way to 0.75, which means that you will still get ragdolled. You just won't get pinball ragdolled, where you get hit by 5 or 3 or 7 or whatever things. There are some exceptions and goals to this, and the above examples do have separate timers. So, bounce down here has a separate timer. It's not a separate timer. It's the same timer as this. It's just called juggle frame in the code. It's the time since you started juggling. And bounce is a special... generally, if you're falling really fast after a ragdoll, you bounce. It's only after a ragdoll. You have to be in J-lift to do it. J-lift is the ragdoll animation, where your body is lifted in the air, basically. If you were falling from a high enough height after being ragdolled, you would bounce. But a lot of forceful downward attacks also cause you to bounce, such as the big drowned-looking dude from... he kind of looks like he's from Salt 1, but he just got a big hammer. He comes up to you in melee range and he'll slam you straight into the ground. You'll bounce up. I'm personally not a fan, but everyone I talked to in my little community said, don't remove this. I think it's funny, or I like it, or something. So I ended up not removing it. I would probably remove it otherwise. But no one agreed with me, so I went with the community on that one. I don't want to change certain things if literally no one agrees with me. That's kind of weird. I don't know. It also caused problems when I did test removal. A bunch of stuff do actually slam you into the ground that don't look like they slam you into the ground, such as the equivalent to Searing Ray, which actually bounces you instead of flings you. So it's not explosion lifter, or lifter. But it's bounce lifter. So it broke those. Instead of ragdolling you, they just shoved you into the ground really hard, and it didn't look quite right. But if you were to get sucked into a vortex by the Aeromancer, because of this custom duration on Tornado, which is, I think, 0.75, pretty sure it's 0.75, you'll go all the way to the top, so very high vertical lift. You'll take the full damage, but when you fall down from the tornado, you will not bounce. You'll just crash. This is your normal, it's called hit land animation, and you get like iframes until you get back up, which happens after bounce as well. But these melee slams from magical hammers on the Thaumamancer, or the Searing Ray equivalent on the Thaumamancer, or the big bloated dude slamming you with a hammer, those will still bounce you because it's under this timer, 0.4 seconds. So you'll be able to bounce potentially twice from the Thaumamancer, and there might be exceptions. I haven't written them in, but exceptions to the triple hammer hit of the magic hammer. So the tornado has this special timer. It's 0.75 or 0.70, which means that you could get caught in 2 different tornadoes. You could. You can also be bounced from an attack from the Aeromancer or something else who has a bunch of ragdolling hits, which makes sense. Like, that seems like it's the intended effect. Maybe not fun for everybody, but it's the intended effect, where you get kind of popped up into the air and then you land in the tornado, and then the tornado takes you up. The tornado can take you up all the way, but the bounce into the tornado and then after you get hit by the tornado are 2 separate like checks. So the first initial hit, your ragdoll or your juggle frame is 0, so you're going to automatically be able to get kind of ragdoll pinballed around for just that 0.25 seconds or 0.4 seconds, whatever I decide. 0.25 seconds is what it is set at. And so you'll get popped up and maybe land in a tornado. The tornado will take you all the way up. If it doesn't take you all the way up, it might pop you out and you might land in another tornado. But once you hit this default timer, only the tornado can hit you. So yeah, you might get hit by 2 tornadoes if some weird, it can happen. You fall out of one tornado and another tornado's nearby. It can happen. But you will only go through the tornadoes as long as the maximum is allowed of this tornado exception. So, which is intended to be approximately all the way to the top, and then that's it. That's the goal of the timer. So if you got hit by 2 tornadoes, it would still be the goal time. It would still be about the same time. But you'll go all the way up. You can no longer bounce, which means that you don't feel like you're getting punished a second time for getting sucked into the tornado, since you might have already been pushed into it by another ability. So we've taken something off the back end here, and we've also given you protection from outside damage. So was this damage reduction while Ragdoll removed a big nerf? Maybe. Maybe it's a big change, a big buff to enemies. But for the very specific situations that it can happen, you are protected from that. The magical hammer, I mentioned it. It's not on here. It was on here. I removed it because I had to mess with it. And I didn't add it back on. The magical hammer of the Thaumamancer, it does this little spin. It flings you straight down or slams you straight down. You do bounce up, which then sets you up for the next hammer. You will be able to be hit by all 3 of these. I don't know what the duration needs to be, but the default duration bounces is 0.4 seconds. The hammer will probably have special numeric values like the tornado, something closer to probably 0.6. But once you get past this timer, only the hammer will allow you will be able to be hit. Will be able to hit you. So it's just going to be, it's very customized. I will look at other bosses. I don't know every certain circumstances, but I'm just trying to hit some of the big ones. Aeromancer being a big one that a lot of people saw. And then, of course, the Thaumamancer just was one of my favorites early on, because I did get caught by a triple hammer very early on when I was playing in like alpha or shortly after release or something. So yeah, once you hit this timer, unless it's a special exception, you will fall. You will fall and you will go into this iframe hit land animation as normal. At which point, this allows you to kind of sit on the ground for just a split second, or you can press a button and get up sooner. In Salt 1, when you got up, you had iframes through the get up part of the animation. In Salt 2, it appears that you do not have iframes through that part of the animation, only on the laying of the when you're laying on the ground. So I may extend the iframes from the hit land animation to be within that time frame, so that you have the capacity to actually get up. Otherwise, you're just probably going to get instant hit, and we're going to cycle through these ragdolls over and over in certain circumstances, which is not fun. You don't want to take away the player's control probably more than once to begin with, and then take it away twice. It just feels bad, which is why like tornado is no longer going to bounce you, because it's like, well, you already lost control once to the tornado. Now you're being bounced and it feels bad. And it also doesn't really make sense that you're going to bounce off the tornado. It makes sense that like a slam would bounce you, maybe it hit you so hard you're a rubber ball now. Yeah, and then of course grapple hook. In the rare cases that grapple hook would save you, I want to make sure that that is completely allowed. The idea being that, yeah, you're in a ragdoll state, you're hurting, but if you can just get close enough to a grapple hook, this is especially more useful against smaller enemies, because bosses don't have grapples in their arena other than their head, which could be kind of extremely cool, actually. If you can get bounced up and ragdolled and then grapple to their head, tell me that wouldn't look amazing. But in normal enemies, a lot of normal enemies are designed to basically throw you off of towers or small buildings, and to prevent you from having the fall damage. Again, I want you to look like a superhero potentially, and just be able to grapple out of that falling situation. In the past, I've talked about some varying changes to elements and stuff here. This has not been implemented. This is still to do. And these will go both ways. But this is what I'm kind of looking at doing. I'm not sure how much of this was in the previous video, so I'm just going to run through it as fast as I can. So poison damage will always be the same amount of time, no matter what source it is. Poison dot. All strikes, so your poison daggers, will do 50% damage. And then they'll do extra damage, either 100% or more. This is how Salt 1 worked. You did double damage inside of the dot, inside of the pool. Salt and Sacrifice has different multipliers from different sources, but your typical poison dagger buff was 2.5, so it was 250% damage. But you're getting 50% here, 100% here, so there's 150% instead of 250%. Anyways, but it's over a smaller amount of time, so default timer is 60 seconds, so 250% damage over 60, or 100% over 10. Which would you prefer? And then this refreshes, of course. So, and it might go to like 15 or 20. 20 is what Salt 1 used, but I might cut the difference and just go to 15. Still requires a pop to activate, but in this case, I think it's a lot more valid to require that for the extra damage. Fire damage, again, duration from, so all strikes would cause this. So these are changes to just all these things. So we're talking like a throwing dagger, a crossbow, whatever, a sword. That's a strike. It's a hit. It will not affect spells. Spells, well, it is not planned to affect spells because spells already did dot, more or less. But this just means that all these attacks will have some small amount of dot to them. Duration from strikes is now always 3 seconds. This includes like the Pyromancer's sword, which already does dot. It'll just kind of be maybe looked at and maybe touched. I'm not sure. But strikes from 100% to 75-25, so that 25 will be done over 3 seconds. This means that fire damage is a little bit less lethal overall, but it is capable of just kind of continuously burning things alive. So you could potentially kill stuff after the timer. If you hit a bunch of times in a row, this will stack up. It will add together. You're not losing any damage. It's just being delayed. Lightning damage, the same thing. Duration will always be 1 second instead. So you get the zip zap of kind of Salt 1. Salt 1 was much shorter duration. I think it was like 0.25 or 0.5 or something. It'll use the same 75-25 split that Salt 1 used on both of these. It will also deal a small amount of stamina damage. This will mean that lightning damage in and of itself can trigger riposte. If you did so little damage somehow, and a high enough stamina damage somehow. But yeah, if you did a couple like parries, but you didn't quite finish off the parries, like you needed 3 parries to put them in a riposte, and then you hit them a couple times with a lightning weapon, this could put them into a riposte just from the strikes. So you could kind of mix your parries and your strikes together, which could be really cool. And furthermore, lightning damage weapons would also mean that if you're hitting their shields, if they're blocking, it would mean that they would go into a riposte or block stun animation faster as well. Effectively doing extra damage to their shields, even though it's not really doing extra damage to their shields. Cold damage is going to be kind of crazy. It's going to be always 5 seconds. I'm going to have to look at like being careful with the Cryomancer being too strong or too weak, because his stuff is really annoying. Strikes from 100% to 90% and then 10% over the 5 seconds. So you are losing some damage. It's a slower... cold is typically a slow effect in a lot of games. So it's going to reduce stamina regen. This includes enemies as a multiplier. So you can't really just defeat it outright from items, but you can defeat it from defenses. So defenses, if you have, what would be in vanilla 100 defense, in the mod it's 200 because it follows the Salt and Sacrifice numbers. But that would be 50% damage reduction. That damage reduction would play into this as well. So if you have high cold resist, this is going to be smaller. I may make this like 35%. And then I may have this multiplier have a minimum value so that you can't just completely negate it, but maybe you can negate most of it. Lightning or holy damage. Light damage. There is no ing. Light damage. It is a very light hit. Anyways, debuff added. I haven't added this yet, but it's going to be added. It will last for 3 seconds like this. Maybe it'll last for just like a couple seconds, but 3 seconds is probably good. And the idea is that it will not do any damage, but it will cause them to be kind of lit up or something. And while they're lit up, they're kind of like smitten by holiness, and it'll reduce their damage by 10 or 15%. I haven't decided, but currently it's slated for 15%, which means that holy weapons could suddenly become very powerful against like New Game Plus type stuff. And I think that's kind of neat. It also kind of plays in, at least the goal is that it plays into kind of a paladin or cleric style build. You can go with like a one-handed mace, and you can kind of smack things around. And as long as you've hit them once, they've been afflicted with their own sins, I guess. I don't know. Dark damage, kind of similar and opposite of light damage. It's going to be really short, like 1 second, maybe 2 seconds. So it's basically a combo effect. Strikes will go from 100 damage or 100% to 95. The debuff will not do any damage. Excuse me. So this is an outright nerf to dark weapons. And it only will affect things that have strikes. So it won't be on the weapon, kind of. It will be intentionally done so that you can see it. But debuff now will apply amplified damage. So it will apply this amplified damage probably on the initial hit. So I'll have to figure out what the actual number is here. But the idea is that you'll gain some kind of bonus damage here. So and it will only be damage from strikes. If it's already a dot, it's already been applied to the target. So it won't be amplifying the dots. So if you were to play around with like dark damage and something else, you'd need to do the and something else in the short time frame afterwards. So this might be upgraded to like 2 or 3 seconds. And this number is all sorts of weird, and that might be changed. Anyways, So dark damage is kind of the opposite of light damage, where you know, enemy takes more damage, enemy deals less damage. And then the Thaumamancer will also get this. The Umbermancer will also get this. Yeah, so good luck. It'll be an interesting mod when it's done, that's for sure. Shops. Shops have gone through a quick phase. Since you only lose 10% silver on death in this game, I have removed the silver bags. If that's a mechanic you liked, I'm sorry. I really don't like it. I don't think it's necessary, and the silver bags being a 20% markup really kind of sucks. You're trading a 50% loss of silver maybe for a 20% loss of silver guaranteed, and I just don't care. There's not enough stuff to buy with silver, or there's not enough reason to carry silver, that it can just be this kind of secondary currency, and it can just be there. You still get a penalty if you lose silver, if you die. In vanilla, if you don't have enough resources like herbs to when you like rest at an altar and an obelisk, you actually pay a markup on those herbs and ammo, arrowheads, Irona ore. You pay a markup on those as well. So you'll pay the markup first, and then if you have any silver left, it's like it and then takes more silver on death or something like that. Anyways, so the markup's like 10%. So they're dinging you a couple times there. That markup shouldn't exist in the mod if it because it shouldn't. It should only give you the base value if you're out, something like that. The main shopkeeper now carries physical ash peers, 1 through 4. This may be changed to 1 through 3, and then 4 would only be available maybe in New Game Plus. I don't know, but I definitely don't want to sell bricks. I want you to have to hunt for bricks, but based on the math I was doing from the internals, it looks like bricks don't drop until Mage Tier 20. I don't know what the highest Mage is for Nameless or for Fated, but generally this would be mid New Game Plus 1, Act 2, mid-Act 2, New Game Plus 1 would be the earliest that you could get a brick. And then the math on that is really weird. It's a 50% chance to drop, and then it's a 50% chance to roll between 35% and 100%. So it's super weird. Anyways, so I may change how these are rolled, because it's basically it's rolling the tier to see like what you should get, and it's kind of weird. So like what I would probably do is make it so that lower enemies, not enemies, lower bosses would be able to drop bricks in New Game and not New Game Plus 1, which has been recommended to me by multiple players, that you should be able to finish out your primary progression in the base game. Shopkeeper now will also carry whatever that the main shopkeeper will, but will carry all elementals as well as the original, because I don't want you to have to go back and forth between shopkeepers if you needed physical ones. And this is based on progression. So like World Lock, if you unlock World 2, you get Ash Peer 1. If you unlock World 3, you get Ash Peer 2. 4 is 3, and 5 is 4. 5 being 4 might be a little too much, and so it might be something closer to beating both of the lords or something. Maybe we do something like that where you have to beat the lords, or you have to beat the final boss, or you have to go into New Game Plus. So like the 4th, which is the I don't know what they're called, but it's like a quad. 5 is a brick. Anyways, so this is up for debate. That 4th one is up for debate. Ash Pure are now go away. It's not a misspelling. Ash Pure are now priced at a much higher cost. So 500, 1,000, 2,500, 5,000, and 10,000. Since you cannot buy bricks, this is actually a sell value for 5,000 because of half sell value. So it means if you didn't have a brick if you did not like your bricks, God forbid, you could sell them for 5,000 silver. So you could buy basically nothing. Anywho, let's double check what's going on. Okay. I've still got time. Covered all this in a previous one. But yeah, shops will continue to kind of see some adjustments here. But those are the primary ones. So no silver bags and stuff like that. We've got the charm rework. I've talked about it before, real briefly. A lot of this stuff is still kind of a to-do list type thing. One of the things I'm probably going to do is one of my favorite amulets right now is this one. It's 10 attack speed and 10 casting speed. I'll probably break that apart and make one 10 attack speed and a different one casting speed. So whether it's like Neuromancer or Diablomancer or something, it means that I have one more modifier that I can slap somewhere. Okay. Piece de Resistance, the boss tier changes. This is probably going to be super controversial, but hopefully it feels really good. I've already behind the scenes done a lot of stuff with boss and general enemy damage and scaling, health scaling and stuff like that. So one of the things that the mod does is you don't get health per level. You have to rely on artifacts, rings, amulets, whatever, for health, as well as vitality. You get more health per vitality point from 2.0 to like 3.5 or 3.57 or something like that. And so you can get quite a bit of good health early on, and that's it. You're going to hit your soft cap on vitality at 40. You're going to hit kind of some base caps on your artifacts pretty quick, and there's only a handful of gear that can give health on gear itself, and you're probably better off using some of the armor rings more so than the pyro health ring. But the pyro health ring is available as the first mage, so it's really good, giving you basically 7 extra health almost immediately if you build 2 of them. But yeah, the progression of bosses, damage, salt, HP, and artifact drops has led me to do a refresh on all of their levels. Levels are called tiers. Many bosses have been moved around 1 or 2 tiers, some of them a little bit more, to create a bit more of a gradual guide rail to progression. And since many mages are optional, this means skipping too many bosses might weaken your character. So how I play the game is probably different from how you play the game. I tend to beat like Pyro, Cryo, maybe Hydro, and then immediately go into Bulgaron, beat the Spider, beat the Arrow, beat the Terra, beat the Mummy, skip, and go into Act 3, beat Fungomancer, Grandma, Corpomancer, and I think you can just straight go to Tree of Heart. The Sap Blood Heart, Tree Heart is its internal name. And then you're done with Act 3. You can skip Meccano and you can skip Lumino. Also, Lumini is another internal name, which means you can jump straight into this, which is the 2 Remain fight. Stop telling me everything's misspelled. I don't care. Normally that'd be great, but this is not that kind of document, Google. You go 2 Remain. You can do like Neuro, Chrono, the Dragon. I think you have to do a 3rd one in there, Umbra, Draco, or Diablo, I think. I mean, I think technically Neuro and Chrono are optional. Like a lot of this is optional and out of order. So if you go straight down, I think you can go straight into these 2 in the basement. If you go into the mountains, you can go to Umbra, I think, right away. Maybe you need 1 mage to go to Umbra. Maybe you need 1 mage to go to some other stuff. But then you can go straight to Blue Dragon. You skip half of the map, and you go straight to here. Biblio used to be required at some point, either in alpha or shortly after release. It was changed so that only 1 mage in this region was needed to open the towers. And so I typically do Biblio. I know most people hate Biblio. I actually dislike Kanito. I cannot read Kanito. He's one of the least favorite bosses to read because I just don't understand him. But I can read Biblio, and I've done a 1-hit kill on Biblio multiple times. I don't think I've ever done a no-hit kill on Biblio. And I usually still, die a couple times trying. Fire and Sky are now equal in tier, and Kanito and Biblio are now equal in tier. So Kanito is going to be a little harder. Biblio is going to be a little easier, just barely. As for talking about the health rings and stuff like that, behind the scenes, there are already adjustments to damage, salt, HP, whatnot, based on tier. So everything in the early game, like Urix and some of the general enemies, Urix has been buffed by about 20% damage. He's going to be a little bit harder. I assume generally that if you're playing the mod, you're probably playing it after having either played the original or beaten the game or something. But Urix doesn't do that much damage comparatively. So he goes from doing something like 22-ish damage to 24-ish damage. It's, excuse me, 22-ish damage to 26-ish damage. Since you have 100 health, 26 damage is, 4 hits, you die. But you get a potion in there and you're all good. Potions are stronger in the mod, so if you do get a potion in there, you can kind of overheal or kind of prevent some damage from overheal. So Urix is still probably not that scary, but it's the difference of 5 hits to kill you versus 4 hits to kill you, depending on your gear. If you have heavier gear like the pot helm and the knight, he probably still takes 5 hits or so to kill you. Pyromancer and Cryomancer had a special condition where they dealt more damage, as well as their minions dealt more damage, because people were struggling with them, both in alpha, in beta testing, and in final release, because they were technically, I think, tier 1, and I don't think tier 0 existed yet, something like that at some point, and people were struggling with them, and Pyro was, just obliterating people. Again, it was probably just 1 or 2 attacks that needed to be motion valued or adjusted, not the entire mage. So they did have a 0.75 multiplier on them and their minions. I have removed that, which makes them a lot more dangerous. They probably still need to be play tested and adjusted further, but yeah. So Pyro is still tier 0. Cryo is now tier 1. Double checking time. So Cryo, you can do Cryo before Pyro, but since he is generally expected to be done after Pyro, and because Pyro's weapons are super powerful, he's weak to fire. If you do Pyro first and you do Cryo second, he is kind of quickly killed because he takes like an extra 25-30% damage from fire. So I have bumped him up 1 tier, which means that instead of doing like Urix plus 20%, he'll do something like plus 26% or something. It's not that big of a deal probably, but this means he will drop higher level artifacts. So this, well, I guess technically he probably only drops a 0 still. 0 tier bosses always drop a 0 tier artifact. Tier 1, then after that, all bosses drop an artifact, I believe, 1 tier below them. Highest mage being something like 41, and the highest artifact being 40. So Cryo still will drop a 0 tier artifact, I guess. Kind of sucks because like you're just not getting scaling on your artifacts there. But that means you'll have only 3 0 tier artifacts, because you'll start getting a tier 1, a tier 2, a tier 2, and a tier 3 if you continue through Act 1 linearly. Hydro has been bumped up to tier 2 just because I wanted the progression to go a little bit faster. I want you to be able to get some earlier artifacts kind of going, because I want to nerf some of those early artifact values ever so slightly more. But Hydro will be tier 2. He's going to hit a lot harder. So instead of being like plus 20% health or plus 20% damage, he's probably going to be something around 33% bonus damage. Maybe not quite that high because he was tier 1 before and tier 2 now, but there's a plus 20% damage kind of starting off that tapers down around here. And then by here, it's actually a negative 30% damage that kind of carries through, and kind of about negative 30% here. And it's around negative 20 here, negative 18 or so at the end here. So while I don't think Undone Sacrifice was necessarily hitting you super hard, you do have less health. So keep that in mind. Just because I say I nerf their damage does not mean that they are somehow super weak. They do, they did 20 damage, they do 16, something like that. And so Undone was not doing 20 damage. But yeah, so then the final boss of every area, the final mage, will be increased in tier. I'm actually debating on making this a tier 5. I don't know. But right now it's a tier 4. So, but the idea is that it's always at least 1 tier higher, and in all other cases, it's 2 tiers higher. So you can go from Veno. Actually, you can go from Pyro straight to Act 2. I wanted Act 2 to have a little bit harder early here. I wanted Spider to be 4. I just couldn't justify it quite. If I made Electro 5, I could probably make Spider 4. But it's what it is. But Huntsman got taken down a notch. I think a lot of people really dislike Huntsman. He's very fast and irritating. And so just ever so slightly, one tier, we're talking again, 5 to 6% damage out of a pool of already, magnificent damage. So let's say tier 3 does 36% damage, versus tier 4's 40% damage. So we're not talking about a lot of damage difference. But you go to the Matriarch, Spider, whatever, I call her just Spider. You got Aeromancer. Aeromancer's up a tier, but his Tornado has been massively adjusted. Ragdoll has been massively adjusted. He should be a little bit more fair. So he's going to hit maybe ever so slightly harder, but because it's going to start tapering off, that 20% is going to taper off probably around here or here, somewhere in between 3 and 5 levels. And I may have to adjust that further. But yeah, Arrow's going to be maybe a little bit more tolerable, but not, not weak. Terramancer, I wanted to nerf Terramancer. He's a really annoying boss. I like his design up to a point, but his minions suck, and his abilities being a different kind of dodge that no other boss uses is kind of cool, but can also be simultaneously kind of irritating. I've had some people say, what if you could jump all of his abilities? I don't know if I can code that without the tooling that was used for a lot of the animation stuff. Because it's just like in the animation system, it'd be like a drag and drop, move this little dot lower or something like that. But I can't do that in the code. I'd have to figure out like, what is the particle type? What is the particle flag? Who owns the particle? Is, whatever. Let's make sure it's a Terra particle. And it's probably easier than I'm saying, but it's still tedious. Anyways, so I didn't nerf Terra. I had a couple requests to nerf Mummy. This is Tireless Exalted. So he has been nerfed to tier 5. I don't know if that really nerfs him, but it means he's got a little bit less health, so he's going to have a smaller amount of aggro timer. When he hits like 50% health, he gets really aggressive and starts doing the death spikes, as well as just moving a little bit faster in general. I think he skips a couple frames in his animations. So how that works is like the keyframe says something like it has a little script on the keyframe, and it says like thresh go to, and the thresh go to would say like, this frame goes to this other frame, and therefore you could potentially skip like a wind down. So instead of a 15 frame action, you have a 12 frame action that could repeat itself. That's just how James does it. That's how the system works in his tooling. Anyways, I don't know if Mummy does that exactly, but that is, if he does speed up at all, that's how he speeds up. Necromancer has gone 1 tier lower, just to kind of fill this timeline in. What's weird is, look at these tiers. Mummy is 7, Necro is 7, Dama is 9, and Sangui is 11. Now, Sangremancer, kind of ignore Sangremancer. He's kind of makes sense. But you go over here and then immediately go into Act 3, and nobody is that tier. Like, you kill potentially 2 bosses because you're probably not going to be me and skip immediately after Mummy. You're probably going to go fight Necromancer at least once. Necro and maybe Thama. And so you're going to get like a tier 6 artifact, a tier 6 artifact, a tier 8 artifact, and you're going to go in here and get a tier 5 artifact, and it's going to feel really bad. And then you go here and you get another tier 5 artifact. And it feels like these bosses are not rewarding at all. Yeah, Grandenia, Grandma, she does give you the tool, which means that she opens up some stuff. You have to kill Grandma to get to Sangui. So I did buff both of them to 1 higher tier, and I nerfed some of this over here. So Sangui is still 8, and which fits. You kill Grandma, she's 7. You can go backwards and kill Sangremancer, he's 8. Or you can kind of continue forward and kill Corpomancer, who's also 8. The Tree Heart I wanted the tree heart to be a little bit stronger because it does unlock the next world. So it is scaling up right there from 8 to 9 immediately. I didn't want to make Grandma 8. That'd be crazy. And Sanglamancer, maybe he should be 9. Maybe he should only be reduced by 2 tiers. I don't know. But it fits the pattern of most mages being 2 higher. Mechanomancer has been reduced a tier, and Luminomancer has been reduced a tier, just for sake of progression timing. Mechanomancer has some hits that are just crazy heavy, and Luminomancer is just a little bit too high. Continuing forward, the 2 that remain will be a little bit stronger again, because you can kind of go from Tree Heart straight into Act 4. But if you stick around in here, you can get like 1 more mage here, another mage here. You can go backwards and do Sangui. You can do Nameless, whatever. But the lowering of these tiers also means you're getting less salt, which means that you might have to do 1 or 2 more mages to get the same level as you previously did, especially if you died. 2 that remain is now level 10, so they're going to be a little more dangerous. Neuromancer is level 10, a little bit more dangerous. Chrono is the same. Blue Dragon is the same. That's the frost worm at the top of the ship. And at that point, you can skip straight to World 5. I think you have to kill 3 mages, so it's not really just straight up Blue Dragon. So maybe Blue Dragon and Umbra need to be flipped. Maybe Umbra needs to be 11 and Blue Dragon needs to be 12. I'll look at that. Maybe that's what needs to happen. They need to be flipped or something. Dracomancer was also pulled down to 12, so that you have 2 mages that are 12 here. And then Diablomancer was pulled from 15 to 14, but he's still 2 higher than Dracomancer. And then I'm going to be making Ash Peers drop at slightly lower levels. So even though the bosses have been kind of adjusted in their tier of levels, you will still be able to get your Ash Peers at an appropriate timeline. And potentially bricks in New Game and not New Game +1. Continuing last area, Kinito and Bibliomancer, I did mention that they are now the same tier. So if you want to skip Kinito and go to Bibliomancer, Bibliomancer is a little weaker. If you want to avoid Biblio, you can go straight to Kinito like expected. Kinito is just slightly higher, but this does mean that you're going to be getting slightly higher stuff. And Kinito might actually be able to drop bricks in the future, because bricks will probably require something like tier 12 or 13 to start dropping, and then they'll be at a very low drop rate. Strangely enough, I don't think the tiers of Ashpure matter for luck, but the drop of Ashpure matter for luck. So the chance of getting an Ashpure, you might have a mage that I think mages will roll a certain number of Ashpure, and so your higher your luck, you get more rolls, more chances. So if you had a 10% chance to get a brick from Kinetomancer and you had higher luck, not a brick, an Ash Pure, it wouldn't be 10%. Let's say you get three Ash Pures by default and you have a 10% chance to get a 4th, that would be that luck would increase that to, 20 or 30%. And then if you have, a 10% chance to get a brick and you get 4, you have 4 rolls of 10%, not quite 40% chance. It's a little bit different. It's because it's multiplicative and independent. But anyways, you'd be able to potentially start farming bricks on Diablo, Kinito, Biblio, Sky and Fire might be able to drop bricks. I don't know in the future. I know most bosses can drop Ash Pure, I'm pretty sure. So, these guys could drop bricks. And maybe Undone guarantees a brick drop. I don't know. Maybe he should, is what I'm trying to say, because he's level 16. Which means that he gives the highest thing, and like other mage, like the mage ratios here, the 13 to 15, 12 to 14, he is 2 tiers above Fire and no longer Biblio, but Fire and Sky are the same. Fire and Sky be the same. I wanted you to be able to have an equal opportunity on either side, but I wanted them to be difficult. I think Sky is weaker as a boss, and I think just buffing him up to be equal to Fire is fine. It also means you get more salt, you're getting more, and you're getting a better artifact. So you're not forced to fight Biblio to get that level 13 artifact. You get 2 13 artifacts before you go to Undone by default, because you have to do both. Okay, we're not done. We're not quite done. Uh, 49 minutes according to my timer here. Because I've modded the tiers, I'm also going through and I'm modding all the weapons and gear that you get from bosses. Now, what does this mean? This is crazy. I have gone through and I have used some math, I guess you could call it. Well, let's skip here. Let's go to this one. Ignore the stuff on the left here. On the right here, presuming you can see it properly. Let's double check that. Okay, you can see that. The class of gear is now determined based on the tier of the mage's first appearance. Not the nameless, not the faded, but just the original appearance. So any boss that is 0 to 2 is a class 1 equipment. You're no longer going to be getting weapons that are like 3 different classes on the same boss. You're not going to get a crossbow that's a tier higher and a dagger that's a tier lower. I'm sorry if that disappoints you, but I am being very consistent here. Maybe that's too homogenous for you, but that is what it is. So these mages will always have class 1 gear. This also means that you will have opportunity to get elemental weapons at a lower tier, but they are not going to necessarily be that much better or different from, say, a level 1 mundane, class 1 mundane. They will, however, have spells like buffs on the fire sword, and they'll have elemental damage, which means that you can use alternative means of killing things, and furthermore, they'll have highly specified defenses and potentially special effects. So mundanes typically do not have things like fast hitter or slow hitter, and the pyromancer's katana, for example, I believe is faster hitter. So level 2 fast hitter, stuff like that. So it's going to be a tier lower. What does that mean for damage? We're talking probably a 4% loss in damage. And same thing with armors, probably a 4% loss in armor, in defense. And that's kind of per tier. So if you're going from 3 to 1, that'd be like an 8%. From 5 to 3, it'd be about an 8%. It's not quite even that way, but it's something really close to that. I'm following some math from Salt 1, from Sanctuary. So we saw a bunch of boss tiers that were kind of in the 6 to 8 and 9 to 11 range. If you're in the 9 to 11 range, all your stuff is going to be tier 4. So Umbermancer is tier 12. All of Umbermancer's gear is now upgraded to tier 5, class 5. So most of Umbermancer's gear was class 4. This means Umbermancer's gear is now late game gear. So a kind of a reward for killing Umbermancer. He's a mage that a lot of people do not like or just find to be difficult. I like him. I do still find him mildly difficult, but I do like him. If you learn how to parry his attack, it's super cool. So this also means Chronomancer is tier 11, and all of Chronomancer's armor and gear will be tier 4, class 4. So that is how it's going to be. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But this means that you can hunt very specific mages. So Venomancer's tier 3, as well as, I think Venomancer's tier 3. Which one is it? Venomancer is tier 2? Oh yeah, Venomancer's tier 3, and the modded class is tier 2. So there we go. So this means the Venomancer's daggers are good, kind of. And then Electromancer is also tier 2. So you're not going to have a class 3 weapon at the end of Act 1. That's kind of silly. There's 5 acts, and you're getting a class 3 at the end of Act 1. So it's going to be class 2. It does mean it's going to be weaker, but it's just going to be a little bit weaker. And some of the stuff at the end game is going to be maybe a little stronger or weaker, dependingly. Act 2 and 3 are probably going to be the most, well, Act 2 is probably going to be the most affected. So Sangui is going to go from tier 11 to tier 8 or 9. What is he? He's 8, which means that his gear is class 3 now instead of class 4. So it is a little bit of a change, and maybe I'll play with that further. But that's what's happening. What does this mean for all the different armors and weapons and stuff overall? And you can see the class tier right here. You don't have to go through a chart. to equate them and convert them, I just have it written here. So you've got Electro as tier 2, Veno, Huntsman, whatever. I don't like Huntsman doesn't have a weapon, but you know, the idea is that if he did, if he had an armor, if he had a weapon, it would be class 2. Yeah, you can kind of see how this goes on. And some of this, I don't have the unmodded class tier because it's different for different weapons. So you might like Chronomancer has a crossbow that's tier 5 because it's the only tier 5 crossbow. There is, I believe, no more tier 5 crossbow and stuff like that. So there are some weirdnesses to the system. I'm okay with those weirdnesses because I'm hoping to create a Ascension system where there is an 11th upgrade to your weapons and armor, which will ascend them to class kind of 5.1-ish. So if you really like Urik's Blade, you can upgrade it to class 11 or to upgrade tier 11, and it would effectively, instead of going to tier 11, it would become a class 5 version of the weapon. I'm calling it class A, and so class Ascension. And I might just call it Ascended weaponry or Ascended armor, and just have, you know, that term just slapped on the gear if it's class 11. And there'll be special modifiers in the math to figure that out. Since I did mess with everything weapon wise, I also went through and created a dynamic on boot up read-in of every weapon that then adjusts their damage and figures out what their damage should be at soft cap. So a bunch of weapons have been nerfed, a bunch of weapons have been buffed. Primarily what has happened is a lot of weapons have been buffed at the low end. So a lot of tier class 0 weapons probably have gained about 5 to 10% damage because they were already being kind of inconsistently, a lot of them were being gutted for damage. So you had one class 0 weapon that did 20% less damage than a class 5, and another class 0 weapon that did 40% less damage than a class 5. And so stuff like that. Generally, it was around 22%, I think was the goal inside the code. But now that's dynamic. So if you were to use the mod with any kind of modded data fields, this will literally override them at read-in. It will not override the data, but it will override the save file probably. So anyways, but yeah, so for example, all of these are now class 5, which means that we gained Umbra as a class 5, and we lost like one weapon or two weapons in Chrono as class 5. But generally, I'm using some Salt 1 math, I'm using some Salt 2 math, and so a class 0 will be approximately 20% or 80% of the class 5 damage. It's about 25% lower-ish, about 4% per tier. And that'll be true of armors as well. Let me rephrase that. Currently, all of this nerf and buff is being isolated in the blacksmithing upgrades. So the base damage is unaffected. The stats are unaffected. And so what you'll see is a weapon that, maybe it gains some damage or lost some damage. Maybe it goes from 13% per upgrade to 12.77 or 12.88 per upgrade. So you're going to see it more as a mathematical skew towards the late game. It's not going to affect the early game because, well, everything's kind of balanced in the early game, so that's not a big deal. So let's just jump into the game real quick. I think I still have it open. Game here. So this is just an old character I have, and you can see kind of the damage that I have. So fast hitter and slow hitter have been downgraded in some of their ratios. So slow hitter, instead of doing 25% kind of bonus, it does 20% bonus. And then slower hitter, instead of doing 50% bonus, it is only 40% bonus. This is not necessarily a direct damage ratio bonus, but it is a score goal thing. So you've got a weapon score and you got a weapon goal, and the idea is that the two numbers are supposed to be as close as possible. So if one is too high, and then you reduce it. If it's too low, you increase it. And there's different ways to do that. In the original tool set, apparently, I discovered that the damage block and the blocking cost, or in first game they just called that balance. Apparently, that actually carried into the scoring system. So I've removed that scoring system, and I'm probably going to be doing some pretty massive changes to how damage block and damage cost works, where generally speaking, all weapons in a given class will have the same damage block or very, very similar damage block and blocking cost, instead of being just all over the board. Vanguards will probably be something like 90% across the board, because if you get a single artifact that's like 10%, you just cap it out. And that would be the idea. You want like a single artifact, cap it out, you're good. Whereas in maybe dual daggers, a lot of these seem to be in the 60s and 70s%. Maybe this stays at 70% damage block. Maybe it has some, blocking cost, maybe a little bit higher blocking reduction, 40-50% block reduction. Then you get over here to, the Vanguard. And maybe this has, 85-90% on all Vanguards or most Vanguards. And maybe there's not necessarily, maybe there's some tier 5s that have 100% block, but maybe we kind of just pull it down and say, Vanguards have a 90% block and their block cost is like 70% reduced. We don't have a lot of high block cost reduction here. So there's Knights Vanguard is 38%. This one's 53%. So you can see, it's whatever. But the idea is that you'd kind of pull these values kind of higher or at like a medium value. Same thing with like the Great Blades. They're huge. So, these two-handers, 85%, 90%. Maybe they're just a little bit lower, 80%, 85% damage blocked. But maybe they do have a decent block cost similar to these. Maybe these go higher to, negative 50%. And this goes higher to like negative 70%. But you'd lose some of the block damage. Anyways, point is that a lot of these weapons would actually be gaining damage, because right now they're losing that damage because it's part of the calculation. The original calculation the game was released with considered that a number. So whoever went through, probably James, and like manually did all the weapons and stuff, like it would say, hey, this score is a little too high. Maybe you should reduce it. You don't have to, but you should. Red text, green text, something like that. So that's been reduced. So that means the Vanguard here, this puppy here, actually probably gained a bunch of damage. It's a class 0, so it probably gained a little bit of damage, but it's in the upgrades, so it's hidden, technically. I just wanted it to be behind the scenes. If you didn't read the patches, you just kind of experience the feel. But the blocking costs and the damage blocked wouldn't affect the damage anymore. So because it's class 0, it probably gained like 2 or 3% damage. Because it's also a high block damage or block percent weapon, it probably also gained probably a massive amount of damage, probably a good solid, another 5%. So this class 0 Vanguard was probably doing damage originally closer, at least towards mid game and late game, probably closer to something akin to like a negative 1 class. And now it's probably closer to what was previously a class 1. And a lot of class 5s, which have really high block. Trying to find a class 5. Do I have class 5? Class 5, Dragon's Maw, something like that. Really high block, whatever. It might actually have more damage, slightly, as well. So it goes both ways. Not everything was nerfed, and a lot of things were actually buffed, including the high tier weapons. So it's something to consider. A lot of stuff has also been nerfed across the board. So like Fast Hitter, instead of doing 15% attack speed, it's 10% attack speed. That's an old change, but that means that you can... This is what happens when the seed becomes the same for every single artifact. Same thing here. If you had an artifact that gives 10 attack speed, you could get you can get higher attack speed on artifacts, and there's Chronomancer's Amulet and stuff like that. So you can make up for, you know, the attack speed being lower, but it does mean that weapons are a little more fair. I think fast hitter is already kind of extremely strong, so having it be 15% versus 10%, especially because it currently stacks. In the base game, it was multiplicative, so you know, 10% with 15% is a little higher than 25%. What is it? I don't know. I don't know the math on that. 1.1 times 1.15. It's a little extra. It's 1.265. So, you know, 26.5% instead of 25%. That is removed in the mod. So attack speeds and stuff are just manual, or not manual, linear. So you can't just stack it to crazy town. But it also means that it's easier to cancel out things like slow hitter. So slow hitter was nerfed for damage or scoring, however you want to call it. And from 25 to 20, and from 50 to 40 for slower hitter, level 2. And but it's easier to cancel out. So slow hitter is only 9% slow in this game, and it's only 16.66% slow on the upgraded version, and stuff like that. So. And maybe I nerf that too. Maybe it becomes 10%, 15%, kind of like the fast hitter. Maybe we just do that instead of 9% and 16. What he's doing is he's dividing by a value, like 1.1 is the divisor and 1.2 is the other divisor, something like that. So we might just change that up. But that means that if you get an attack speed item, you can cancel out that difference. So slow hitter, it's weaker probably, but it's also capable of being canceled out, which is how Salt 1 worked, by the way. And if you've played Enhanced, Enhanced uses a 1.2 modifier on slow hitter weapons. The default was like 1.16 or something like that. So it's only like 4% more damage, but it is noticeable that enhanced combat's slow hitter weapons are a little bit better and more fair and fun, in my opinion, than the classic version, just because they have that a little bit more damage. And the game already let you cancel out the slow in the first game. So if you equip Mossy Charm in Salt 1, you would get 20% damage, but no attack speed bonus or reduction. You're canceling out to 0. So kind of works both ways. I mean, you could always get, extra damage, 10% damage on, 100, 120 is, another multiplier there. So, was it 132 or something? Anyways, that is it. I just wanted to kind of show off some weapons. So we get to see like that the Twin Dagger is like 25 damage. I think in the base game, I'd probably be closer to like 22. This is 21. Again, this is probably closer to 19. This was also probably closer to 19. These are not fully upgraded. So you can see like their little score here. So that's like 4, and that's 6, and that's like something else higher. This is a higher upgrade, which is probably why it does so much damage. This is also a slow hitter or slower hitter. I'm not sure which, and it's a triple scaling. So yeah. If you made it this far, please like the video because you watched this much. Subscribe if you already haven't. Download the mod. It's not quite this version yet. Come to the Discord. Come discuss the mod. Tell me what you like, what you don't like. Tell me why, especially. Don't just tell me you hate it. And there's just a handful of us there. We're pretty chill. And until next time, take care.